ZinCo Canada, we're a green roof supplier. I always like to start with some photos of green roofs because I often get asked if it's green sheet metal or green shingles. But green roofs can come in many different forms and sizes. This is Van Dusen Gardens, one of the first buildings, as I understand it, to go for the Living Building Challenge. It only got petals in the end, but this is what you would consider as a biodiverse green roof. And then green roofs can also come in different shapes. This is a sloped green roof out of Norway. It's about 35 degrees and just over 23,000 square feet. And then we also, in the context of a lot of the contractors here, we do a lot of residential applications. The one on the far right doesn't really look like a house, but it is. That's in Port Hope, and that actually slopes into the earth, so that was a very cool project for us. And then we also do a lot of laneway garages and some additions, rooftop amenity spaces. A little bit about us, but really about green roofs. Green roof Mecca is Germany. ZinCo is one of the original producers of green roof systems. Now it's an international distributor, and what I do is I just have the rights to distribute that product within Canada. I believe we're now in 66 years of green roof manufacturing. The opposite of biomimicry would be this slide. This is the reason why the green roof bylaw came to Toronto to begin with. Ignoring nature and paving everything over has resulted in a lot of mass flooding events. And the idea of a green roof is to kind of act like a sponge. So the number one purpose of the green roof bylaw and green roofs within the built environment is to delay peak flow. What we want is to absorb water on the roof and slowly release it into the roof drains. Also to catch sediment and improve stormwater quality. Toronto is a combined sewer system. 20% of our sewers also have toilet sewage in them. So when we do have a big rain event, we get poo that kind of gets pumped into Lake Ontario. And that's primarily why you'd never swim there. Within a green roof, the water absorption factors primarily are within the growing media. 70% of the water is held there. 20% in the drainage board, and then 10% in the, what you'd call like a moisture mat or a protection mat. You really want to protect the roof membrane, and that's kind of the final layer there, as well as a root barrier that would go on top. Classically, the layers are root barrier, protection mat, drainage board, filter sheet to maintain an air gap between the drainage board and the soil, and then your soil and plants. There's two different approaches. There's a modular approach and a built-in-place approach. Modulars are like a 1x2 foot tray that you can plunk down on a roof like Lego. Built-in-place is everything shows up in rolls or sheets and you assemble everything on the roof. A lot of green roof consulting that all the different companies will do should be based on research and an evidence-based approach. This is an example of test plots. There's a varying array of different systems here that get repurposed every year, or some of them have been around for several years. And we're just collecting data on what works and what doesn't. Plants on a roof are very different than plants on the ground. So we want to know what we can recommend and what wouldn't work. And we typically bring in interns who are doing an environmental science degree, and we have them work on this, and provides valuable data and good education. This is the most classic green roof. This is an extensive green roof. It's been around for probably the longest amount of time. It's lightweight and very widely installed, but not where the market's actually moving, which is where I'll go. These are what you would, I'd say, most commonly see. So that's kind of an example of a pool house. There's a Canada goose that nests here every year. I didn't get that photo, but we're also providing some habitats. This is Ferndale Spa. This is actually Peter Gilgan's spa from Mattamy Homes. This is a very interesting project. We installed this. We asked to swim in the lake after we installed it, and he had to call his lawyer to ask if we were allowed to do that. So, sloped roofs. In a residential application, we see a lot of sloping rooftops. We can do anything from, or green roofs can be anywhere from a 10 degree to a 45 degree pitch. And the approach is entirely different when you do a sloped roof because you're dealing with shear forces on the roof. Shear forces are basically the natural inclination of a green roof to want to slide off the roof. So it's very much more engineered when you do that. You have to create what's called shear barriers, and a shear barrier will mitigate those shear forces. And the entire structure of the building is really quite differently designed to accommodate that load. So these are the base layers being installed. Unfortunately, that element there is styrofoam. We don't use that anymore because it's really quite bad, but that was what was once very common for this type of application. That's a growing media that's very aggregate rich. The purpose of that is to facilitate drainage. One of the most important things with a green roof is actually retention, but also the rebound rate. You want the roof to get ready to absorb the next rain event. And then that's the roof completed. This is in Burlington. It's actually one of the previous owners of ZinCo. Along the base there, you can see shear brackets. There's 5 of them. That's the first layer or the first shelf that's holding back the shear forces. In the middle of the roof, you can't see it, but there's another shelf there, and you're separating out the loads on the roof. It's a little bit of a clearer example. This is in Grand Bend. This one wasn't quite finished yet. This was his garage where he wanted to tinker around. The green roof in this instance actually provided a fair bit of shielding from the sun and cooled his workshop during the summer. And he has verbally told us that it does feel quite cool and easy to work in there during the hot months. And he was surprised by how well it actually worked for him. From extensive green roofs that I talked about before, this is where the market is going, and this is where it really should have always been. Where you take nature to build, you should try to replace it. So we're displacing earth. Maybe the rooftop can be used as some kind of new habitat for it. It's a system that integrates multiple different features. You can do different soil depths, different levels. You can put logs on the roof. You can have ponds. We've done and tried all of that. Ponds are extremely tricky, but everything else is pretty easy to do. And you can end up with something like that. There's no reason other than structural design for this type of roof to not be more common. You're adding a lot more value to the environment for pollinator pathways, birds, insects. You're creating new habitats. This is 49 Delaware. This was an adaptive reuse project where we used all native plants. So we took an existing flat roof. We converted it into a biodiversity area. All of the windows of their children's bedrooms look out onto the roof, so the kids were very excited about that. And this is it just after planting. So we took what was just a SBS 2-ply membrane, and we converted it into a natural habitat. This was a focus for people who were actually wanting to produce honey, I believe, which in the context of sustainability, honeybees actually aren't very good for the environment. But we did a pollinator garden for them using all native species. And we had 8 inches of growing media, so that's 200 millimeters, plug planted with 4-inch pots and 1 gallon pots as well. This also was an existing roof, but it had been pre-engineered to have a pollinator garden on it. And importantly, subsidized by the City of Toronto. So there's an eco-roof incentive in the city where they'll pay what works out to be about 40% of the cost. They'll rebate back if you do a green roof voluntarily. And those are proceeds that are generated by the green roof bylaw that they will use to pay people to voluntarily green their assets. And then some photos. So we kind of saw the reintroduction of insects and different types of animals onto the roof as a result of doing something like that. So one of the initiatives that should be present amongst buildings and what we do and all of our colleagues, we should be focusing on biodiversity being the new normal. Restorative practices for the environment should include the idea of pollinator pathways in urban settings. There's some very interesting research showing different biodiversity roofs in a city in London and the actual migration of different pollinator species across the city as a result of that. And all of that, of course, is to promote new habitats for insects, birds, and animals. Green roof and solar, very emerging as a new market, especially as solar has come down in price. This is a non-penetrative approach. So you have solar bases that are ballasted by the green roof. So in the idea of like thermal bridges, I believe, maintaining a sealed envelope across the entire roof structure, this is a really good way to use the green roof as your ballast mechanism and also improve the ROI or the energy performance of your building. This is a project in Dundas, Ontario. It was also a microgrid. So all the energy produced on the roof was stored in a battery that was subsequently utilized throughout the day or stored to be used later during peak times, which I guess is during the day. But this home also is a behemoth and not sustainable at all. It's 8,000 square feet and ridiculous, really. But we were happy to help out. This is a project by the owner of SMPL, Joel Tanner. This is his house in Hamilton. Also turned out to be a microgrid, not nearly as big as the last one, and actually quite a good focus for him on sustainability. This is just an image of the underside. So there's the racking that's connecting directly to what would be called an SB200 drainage board. That is just the ballast mechanism, and that racking is installed first, and then the soil is installed on top, and then everything's planted. Nothing's adhered, nothing's penetrated, everything is just ballasted by the weight of the green roof. And then finally, you can do something more like an amenity space with green roofs, and this is out of Burlington. So this is the McCann residence, also pre-engineered, but sat like this for a while, and then we came in and did a design and consulted on the supply and installation. And you can turn what was once just a unused space that they did plan on using into more of a patio amenity area. Everything is built on top of our drainage board, so you have one even plane of drainage underneath of everything. And what you end up with, something more like that. Obviously very beautiful. If you can, I think they saved for a number of years to be able to do this because like something like this isn't typical, but they were able to come up with a design that facilitated trees, shrubs. They had the structural capacity obviously to have all that weight on the roof, which is the most important factor. But what they had prior to this and then what they ended up with is quite significant in contrast and turned out to be quite a beautiful project. And then finally, this is the one of the newest trends in Toronto at least, laneway houses and building garages. We're seeing a lot of people utilizing the rooftop of their garages or getting an easement from the city to build a laneway suite. Part of that is instituting a green roof. So we've done a lot of work on that throughout different laneways in Toronto. This was quite a nice project that does have a pond on the roof. It won a Design Excellence Award. And this, I think, with trying to improve density, there's different ways or better ways to do that, but the laneway suites in Toronto are a really good way to do that too. And that is it for me.